Go ahead. Time now is 6 o'clock. This is the regular session meeting of the Board of Education, a meeting which occurs in public. Call this meeting to order. First item we have is to approve the agenda that you've seen and have before you. So we need a motion to approve that, please.
So moved.
So moved, Mr. Burgess.
Second.
Second, Mr. Ransom. All in favor, please raise your hands. Passes 5-0. Next are the minutes that need to be approved formally. And we're looking at the May 10th regular session, May 18th budget hearing 1, May 18th special session, June 7th budget hearing 2, and June 7th work session. That's a mouthful there, so we need a motion to approve those.
So moved.
So moved, Ms. Argo.
Second.
Second, Ms. Parrish. All in favor? Passes 5-0. Next are recognitions.
Good evening, board members and Mr. Superintendent, if you could please come to this area for our June 14th recognition.
Oh, you're doing it. You're fine.
You sure?
Yeah. Just lean over, we'll get you in the picture.
All right, tonight the board will recognize our state Georgia Young Author winner, and it's Knox Thornton from Oconee County Elementary School, and Knox won for the entire 3rd grade in the state for his entry the 3rd grade. Come on up, Knox. And he's actually going to read you his entry. And this is a creative writing competition. It's sponsored annually by the Georgia Language Arts Supervisors and the Georgia RESA Network. And Oconee County Schools had a total of 4 regional winners. And then we were especially proud of Knox, who won at the state level. So again, he's going to read his entry the 3rd grade.
A lot has changed since the 2nd grade. A new school, new teacher, and new friends I have made. There are changes that are new, and children all over the world have to do them too. I'm trying to be a friend, yet distance till no end. I would run 1,000,000 miles just to get to see all those smiles. We wear masks to protect us from germs, but the thought of forever makes me squirm. I will embrace the day when we can run and play and not have to wear a mask any day. We have zones and can't touch. I never knew I could miss the swing so much. I get thirsty like I climbed a mountain. If only I could drink from the water fountain. A challenge only makes you stronger, so I know I can do it a little longer.
Picture. Now, if that didn't capture this year, and we are going to get your picture. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. And let me. Yes. Parents, if y'all want to come and get a picture, you are welcome to. Why don't y'all get in the picture? All of y'all.
Great.
Jeremy.
Absolutely. We have to come on this side.
Here we
Come on.
go. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you.
Thank you, and that concludes this evening's recognition.
All right.
That was it.
Okay, next on the agenda is points of pride. Mr. Joe Good. See you. Principal, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Good evening.
So, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, of course. And we have all heard this phrase before, and trust me, if you Google it, there are a lot more interesting versions and some very interesting memes to go along with it that will make you laugh. When reflecting on what I was most proud of for this school year and coming up with what to present on tonight, I could not pinpoint any one initiative, one piece of data, one program, one test score that was more important or made me more proud as a principal than the overwhelming sense of pride that I feel when I talk about how Malcolm Bridge school community came together to face the challenge of this past year. And it makes me smile like a mama and tear up and everything else. But I can truly say that I beam with pride when I think about how our parents, our students, and all Oconee County staff members, board members, business partners, and anyone else that I might be leaving out truly came and worked together. Overwhelmingly, everyone took the attitude from day one of what can we do to stay in school and to make sure that those students that need to learn from home can. Rather than complain and gripe unanimously, our parents were, how can we support you? What do you need? What do the teachers need? What do the students need? And the things that I feared people may complain about or hate, they were so understanding about. Things like not being able to come in for lunches or volunteer in the classroom. While we all miss those things and can't wait for them to get back to normal, they supported us in it, and that was huge. At the end of this school year, I asked our staff to share new procedural or instructional practices that they tried as a result of how we had to do things differently and that they would like to continue. Tonight, I'd like to share a few of those with you in terms of the impact on procedures, instruction, and communication at Malcolm Bridge. Procedural impact. First of all, there was a focus on cleanliness, and we always clean for health. That's nothing new. But our building sparkled. Students really wash their hands or use sanitizer before going to lunch, where in the past they may have just pretended to. Things like not sharing as many pencils, and we all know what elementary schoolers do with those. It was clean, it was tidy, and while we had students who had to quarantine, and so our attendance numbers in terms of those missing less than 10 days will still be higher than normal, we truly cut down on the number of students out for the typical childhood illnesses, and I think we had 2 reported cases of strep all year, which is unheard of at the elementary level. Additionally, we plan to continue to be intentional with things like transition times. So in the past where you would have a lot of students in the hallway for everybody to switch classes at once, teachers were very strategic in terms of using the back doors. How can we exit in rotational ways where there's not as many kids in the hallway at one time and things like that. And it's amazing how much faster transitions became. Cut down on loss of instructional time. Definitely something we want to continue. As a result of students spending more time with their homeroom classes, there was a greater sense of community that was developed. And while we will go back to switching classes more often like we have in the past, we will be implementing responsive classroom, which you've heard some about with some schools trying last year and more going to this coming year, where students begin the day in homeroom each day and spend that quality time getting to know each other, how to support each other, how to care for each other, which we hope will continue. Overall, being intentional brought about many best practices and proved successful for us. It made us stop and think of, well, we've always done it this way, but that doesn't mean it's still the best. So just thankful for my teachers for taking the lead with that. Instructional impact. The increased use of technology was huge. What a perfect timing to end up one-to-one. Teachers had to think outside of the box in order to achieve the same outcome. Through increased technology both in the general classroom and in the STEM setting, teachers met with our ITS on a regular basis to learn new programs and best practices in technology, and they were able to use these things right away. So in the past when we've had meetings and some teachers would go and run with it and some teachers were still scared of it, everybody had to grasp on and didn't have a choice but to use the new technology to replace things like some of the hands-on manipulatives, to replace some of the creating posters that you would share and have in the hallway that would take up space. Also, they were able to teach students to collaborate with each other more through the technology to cut down on some of those face-to-face interactions. So while some of that we miss, some of it will allow students to work on a collaborative project in one group while another group is doing something that needs quiet. And so those two things can happen at the same time in the classroom. That was huge. Our STEM teacher at the beginning of the year wasn't able to use many of the robotics and things that groups had to constantly be hands-on and touch. So she spent the first 6 to 9 weeks just teaching computer skills, how to do different things, whether it be in the Google platform, how to use the different programs that teachers would then use for instructional purposes, so that the general education teachers didn't have to teach the basics of the program. They could teach the content because the kids already knew the program. They had learned it in STEM. So she plans to do that again this upcoming year and really collaborate with those teachers to front load and make sure students at each grade level know how to use the needed programs to allow teachers more time with the content. Teachers held more one-to-one student conferences when they couldn't necessarily do as many small groups. Our staff felt that this practice helped them to better know their students and plan to use a mix of these individual conferences and groups next year. In art, our teacher implemented individual sketchbooks. This was originally implemented to decrease sharing supplies, decrease that time passing out, everybody touching multiple papers and everything. Ultimately, what it ended in was a unique keepsake for each child to take home at the end of the year, showcasing their growth over time. They still did the big projects, making things out of clay and all that, but their day-to-day projects were in the sketchbook. So then she was like, well, we could use them again, but realized the impact of sending them home all together at one time. Our teachers created individual sets of manipulatives for students to earn as needed, depending on the lesson. So we truly had to inventory everything that was in the building, pull everything out of all those closets and see, okay, do we really have enough of this? So in doing that, we were able to make these individual sets that students could keep at their desks. Well, this decreased the time passing out, students digging through things, getting up to find what they needed, which ultimately ended in more instructional time as well. So we continue to be proud of the different ways of thinking outside the box there and looking at how can we do the same thing more efficiently. Communication impact. Our teachers loved the new way that Meet the Teacher was changed. It was more spread out, if y'all remember, and that certainly allowed the teachers to get to know the parents better. It allowed parents to give that pertinent information about their child, and they were able to make better connections. We also found that we increased parent involvement by offering virtual IEP meetings and parent conferences. And we'll definitely go back and did at the end of the year to doing in person what we can, but we were able to involve so many more parents by offering this. Parents that may not be able to take the time off from work to travel, to go into a meeting and then travel back, but parents who were able to take 30 minutes to pop onto a virtual session. So that was huge to give more parents a say in their child's instructional school day and process and decision making. That was great for strengthening those relationships. In the past, with our PBIS program, we all used paper Malcolm money, which people would hand out and the students could use to redeem for tangibles when they were meeting expectations. This year, most of our grade levels switched, and we plan to have all switch next year to an online classroom dojo program. This is awesome because it's an app that parents can download for free, and it allows them to get that real-time information when their students caught doing something right. So at the end of the day, when their child goes home and says, well, what happened today? Nothing. Nobody ever notices that I'm always doing the right thing. Well, parents can actually see when their child's getting rewarded. Administrators can also see which teachers are using it and which teachers may need reminders. So that was great all around as well. And so while we recognize the importance of communication, nothing beats that face-to-face. We still want teachers meeting face-to-face with students and parents. The way that we were able to improve communication and touch more people and form more relationships ultimately proved very valuable for this year. So without question, our staff reported that the greatest accomplishment from this past school year was that our students had the opportunity to be in school in person for the entire school year, while families had the choice to learn from home if that was best for them. Thank you, board members, district leaders, and parents and community members for the opportunity and, more importantly, your support of Malcolm Bridge Elementary.
Thanks for sharing a lot of those day-to-day things that we never hear about.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Ms. I'll say something, Jennifer. I've read, in the last couple of months, I've read countless articles talking about how this year has changed education, is likely to change the way education is going to work going forward. But I haven't read anything that was as articulate and detailed and focused on what was really going on in the classroom as what you just outlined.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that.
I appreciate
Very
it.
instructive.
It was a powerful year. It definitely was.
Thank you very much. Next is communications to the board. And first, we have business services. Sarah Andrews. Sorry. Simon Paul was there.
Well, good evening, everyone. Business Services has 7 items of information for this evening's board meeting, and we'll begin with the cash balance report. The balances here are as of May the 31st. Next, you have a list of nearly 500 vendors that were paid in the month of May. The third item of information is the budget report. Revenues and expenses are where we would anticipate them to be, and the year-to-date revenues and expenses are also as of May the 31st. The ELOS collections report is the fourth item of information. April collections are 6.94% lower than the collections for April 2020, and the rolling average is 7.11% more than the previous year. The board report for ELOS 5 is the fifth item of information, and revenues and expenses have been updated to reflect May collections and payments. Board members, you will also notice that the lighting project for North Oconee and Oconee Middle has been closed out, and so the final cost is reflected on the report. The sixth item of information is an update on the HVAC upgrade for the Civic Center. If you will remember that we did budget $100,000 this year in the budget for an upgrade to the HVAC center at the Civic Center, and we have an agreement with the county that we share in 50% of those costs. So we have received that invoice for the county, and we will process that payment this month if everything is in order. And so the last item of information I have is on our Esr Fund allocations. You know, we are in the process of closing out the year, and I usually bring our year-end reports in September, but since this is my last board meeting, I wanted to go ahead and share information on some items that we have closed out. Liz Harlow is our Director of Finance, and she handles all our grant responsibilities within the Business Service Division. So I'm going to ask her to come up and share some information with you on our Esr funds.
Can you tell me what that acronym means? I came from a background in education. That's one acronym I don't know about.
Ms. Harlow speaks and can give you lots of information.
I know what it is, I just don't know the acronym.
So the acronym means Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funding.
Great.
Commonly referred to as the CARES funds, right?
Okay, that one.
Yes, or ESSER.
Yes, sir.
So, good evening, board members. You will see before you a summary of our elementary and secondary school emergency relief funding, what is known as Aster Funds. As a reminder, this funding was allocated based on Title I allocations, which are based on our free and reduced meal percentages. In comparison to the 180 school districts in the state of Georgia, Oconee County Schools received the second lowest funding per FTE for each of these 3 ESSER grants. Board members, I would like to emphasize that these grants are reimbursable grants, meaning that expenses must first be incurred and paid, and only then can ESSER funds be requested for reimbursement. Esr 1, also commonly referred to as the CARES Act, was approved on June 24th, 2020. Oconee County Schools was allocated nearly $357,000 for Esr 1, or just under $44 per FTE. Esr 1 required an allocation to private schools, and they worked through our staff to address those needs, which amounted to nearly $26,000 of the $357,000 allocated.
ESR 2, also referred to as the CRRSA Act, was approved on March 15, 2021. Oconee County Schools was allocated just under $1.5 million for ESR 2, or about $182 per FTE. ESR 1 and 2 are now closed out, and all funds were expended in the cost categories listed on the summary. The first 5 categories were for costs needed to make our buildings and buses safe, such as purchasing electronic sprayers to disinfect our surfaces, masks for students and staff, and other items to help in making our buildings and buses physically safe. For the meal service category, the school district provided continuous feeding service after school closures took effect on March 13th. Students and any individuals under the age of 21 were able to pick up meals starting March 17th, just 2 days after the start of remote learning. For technology, we purchased items that helped us implement distance learning, and we were able to fund much of our distance learning costs through Esr Funds. As you may recall, board members, the funding of the governor's retention bonus did not cover all OCS full-time and part-time employees, so the cost to extend the governor's retention bonus to all regular employees was funded through ESR 2. Oconee County Schools has been allocated $3.3 million for ESR 3, also known as the ARP Act, which is about $408 per FTE, and we are working through the Department of Education process and waiting on the next steps. In addition to these 3 main grants on this summary, Oconee County Schools had some ancillary categorical charges to other smaller grants provided through ESR 1, totaling approximately $88,000. So this concludes my summary of our Aster funds, unless there are any questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes the business services report, unless there are any questions for me.
I don't have a question per se, it may surprise you, but I do have something I want to say.
That surprised me.
As you mentioned, this is your last time you will be before us, and be moving on to other things. I hope you know you will be sorely missed.
Thank you.
You have, since you've been here, you have continued what I have come to understand since I've been on the board as a high degree of professionalism in our financial activities. Very high bar that you've maintained without question, without ever any stumble, and I have a little bit of experience in knowing just how hard that is. So I want you to know that you've always been very responsive and very thorough in every request, which at times has been a lot, I'm sure, in the requests for information that we've made. You've always been very thorough, very accurate, and responsive in all of those requests. You've moved this whole school system to a new height of fiscal integrity over the few years you've been here, as evidenced by the numerous awards and recognitions and rankings for our financial operation that you deserve all the credit for, and you should be recognized for that as well. But maybe most of all, you've demonstrated a skill in being able to define and manage and present financial information that sometimes some people would call budget magic, and I think that's a significant skill that you've brought to the job that you've done here for the Oconee County school system. You've always been able to sometimes miraculously produce a balanced version of a budget under very difficult situations and circumstances. You somehow were able to always somehow just out of thin air produce surpluses that just happened to show up and were there, never projected, but always showed up and consistent. you were even able to magically wipe away any comments that I know the auditors were making in our audits. But somehow, by the time the audit was finalized and presented to us, it was magically vacant of any of those comments in those pages that would normally have their cute little comments in. And maybe even on top of all that, last month, I think it was last month, you were able to produce a sales tax report that had over 70% growth in it, which nobody can explain that, but somehow you made it happen and produced it. So all of that is to say that I think not only one have you done a great job and demonstrated great skill, but you sort of demonstrated a level of magic in doing it. And so to me, having worked in that arena all my life as well, it kind of rises to a standard of what I would call budget wizardry. So, just a small token of recognition of some of the skill that you brought. We have a little gift we want to present to you tonight for you to take with you in your next roles.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the kind
You
words.
need to open that
Just say if we haven't released you yet.
Yeah.
Thank y'all so much. I'm gonna miss everybody too. It's been a great pleasure to work for such a great organization. I'll be keeping up with Oconee County Schools just to see how the greatness continues. Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
She will. Just for our viewing pleasure, right?
Yes, sir. Up next, you have the school council annual reports, as the board will recall each year. We bring these annual reports, and it's just really a summary of the different topics of discussion that took place through our local school councils at all of the schools that conducted those meetings this year for informational purposes. And so we share those, as you said, just for information.
Thank you. Next is public communication. We have one speaker tonight, and I have to read, and I don't know who it is, but I have to read this protocol for the board. The board allows 5 minutes for comment from citizens who have been placed on the meeting agenda. 3 minutes allowed for those to sign up at the meeting. Please state your name, address, topic. The board would request that you refrain from making any disparaging remarks about school system personnel. This provision protects the board members from receiving information that might disqualify them from sitting on a tribunal should these issues come before the board at a later date. Generally, there will be no response to comments and questions posed by citizens at the meeting. All comments and questions will be received, taken under advisement by the board. When appropriate, a response will be made by the superintendent or a member of the board, at or before the next regular session. However, any member of the board shall be free to respond and make public comments if he or she elects to do so. So,
Yes, sir, we have one speaker, Mr. Kevin Price. Mr. Price, if you'll come up to the podium, please, and state your name and address.
I'm Kevin Price. I reside at 1260 West Fitzgerald Lane in Watkinsville. I'm here to just make a comment about the column ferry bid process. First of all, I'm not here on the side of grapes, okay? I'm here as a taxpayer in the community. We pay a lot of taxes on commercial and residential property that we own. I'm also backed up by Doug Stiles HVAC, Henry McElroy Plumbing, and probably between us, we represent at least 60 residents of Oconee County that would have worked on this project. As most of you probably know, we've been around in this market 12 or 15 years, and have successfully completed several of your projects. Most notably, the fast track HVAC rebuild at North Oconee High School a year or so ago. They got done in the summer. Then the Oconee County High School project that went for about a year with an active campus with 4 wings being added on to and a complete rebuild of the inside of the building. That just didn't happen by happenstance. It was because we had very dedicated people working on that project. As a matter of fact, you may not realize, but virtually every subcontractor that worked on that Oconee County High School project was from Oconee County or had some significant tie to Oconee County. I won't bore you with mentioning them, but that's the fact. We're just disappointed that I'm not sure exactly how that procedure took place of how the ranking, when you take a low bidder, which we know we were the low bidder, wasn't a lot, but it was a low bidder. And then you factor in the performance that we've had in this community, not to mention the jobs and the people that would be out there working. How does that not happen? So, okay, that's all I'm gonna say to that. I probably wouldn't have been here tonight had I already received through the Open Records Act that I requested last Wednesday we just want to see the copies of the books. We want to see the copies of the books. We want to see the matrix. We want to see how we got scored. And let me say this. We probably do this 2 or 3 times a year with other communities that we work in. We work all over a broad section of the state of Georgia. And part of the reason that we ask for the books, it's not sour grapes. We lose a lot more projects than we get every year. I mean, that's just how this is in this business. We just want to see, from a learning perspective, what our book looks like compared to the other people. But, you know, certainly in this situation, I want to see the matrix and understand it and how it ranked and how if we had the low price and we ranked good on performance and what drug us down. And that's what I want to know. So I'm understanding through Mr. Whitmire today that we should receive these books tomorrow. I sent another email today, a couple of emails today, just trying to figure this out. I'm not an attorney, but Georgia law states that we should be getting that request within 3 days of the request, which was made last Wednesday. So that's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. I do want the books, and we're just going to review it. But I'm here mostly just to stand up for my people. His employees, our employees, and the taxpayers that work with us. And, you know, I don't know why. Certainly it's your choice, and I'm fairly certain that this process was within your rights and the law. But, you know, I would just encourage you to consider, you know, when these decisions are made, maybe you know, or I hope you know, I really do hope you know, of how it was done. But if not, please look into it. And I'm speaking now as a taxpayer of how things go. There's going to be a lot of good Oconee County folks sitting this one out. It's not a major, big project, but they all add up and they count. And the other thing is we take great pride.
I'm going to give you 30 more seconds. I know you're ready.
Okay, yeah, I'm done. But we take great pride in working in our home community. We're qualified, so we appreciate what you do. We appreciate your service. This is not sour grapes. Please don't take it that way. We're not going anywhere. We're going to bid on your next project, whatever that might be.
Would you just, whoever in the system you work with, just give feedback once you get your materials? I think that's always helpful.
Certainly, I will.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Appreciate you hearing us.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we got some, action items here tonight. First is, internet acceptable use.
Yes, sir. I wanted to apologize for not asking earlier. We do have 4 policies that we're looking to put forward to place on the table for review. We can take those all at one time if the board would like, or we can take them individually as the board desired. We have 4 policies that are all.
Talking about field trips.
No, sir. We have 4 board policies. A, B, C, and D are all board policies.
Just recommend each of them in a group. Is
Okay. All right. Yes, sir.
that all right with everybody?
Yes.
Okay, and apologies for not asking that earlier. We will again recommend action items on the board policy labeled A, B, C, and D in your packet. Those are BCBI, GARH, TBIA, and IFBG. Board policies to be placed on the table for public comment and review until our next board meeting.
Or the superintendent's recommendation, unless you have questions as we're doing this. We need a motion to approve.
So moved.
So moved, Mr. Burgess.
Second.
Second, Mr. Mansson. Question? Okay. Early. All in favor? Raise your hands, please. Passes 5-0. You were early on that one. Okay, next, can we combine the field trips?
Yes, sir. We'd recommend the 4 field trips labeled E, F, and G in your packet, and H in your packet, to be approved as presented.
Okay, you've heard the superintendent's recommendation. Do we have, unless you have a question, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved. Ms. Parrish?
Second.
Second, Ms. Argo. All in favor, please raise your hands. Passes 5-0. All right, next is Colin Ferry's Elementary School Edition.
Yes, sir. And we have let them, the school that's going to Pinehurst know that Mr. Burgess is available to chaperone in addition. So
I'm packed.
we're waiting to hear back on that. Yes, Colin Ferry's School Edition. We do recommend Almacher Brothers Construction Company with a bid of $3.135 million to do the Colin Ferry Elementary Edition. So that is the recommendation.
Okay, any questions? Yes, sir.
Jason, we had talked about this last week. What's the total project budget that we would be therefore approving for this expansion of Colin Ferry?
Yes, sir. The project budget is $3.65 million total. The recommendation is for Almacher Brothers for the $3.135. There's additional cost of furniture and other items that would take that project to about $3.65 estimated.
Can you, I thought we'd kind of gotten into practice in the past of approving a total project budget when we approved a construction project like this. Can you give to us then, at the next meeting, we find a sheet of the 3.65 and how it breaks out with contingency and technology and equipment and all that? And that would then become the approval document that we're approving for the total project budget for this, including the 3.1 for our market.
We can certainly provide that. I believe we have provided you something like that in the past. We've not had an formal approval of the board on the total project cost prior. We have informed the board of what we anticipate the total project cost. So that would just be will of the board if the board wants to formally approve that.
Well, I'd like to suggest that that's what we start doing, is approving a total project budget as opposed to just a component of it, so that there's a budgetary control for the entire expense for the whole project. And if things happen, they happen, and we deal with it as we would any other budget expense, but it becomes a budgetary control mechanism and a budgetary guide mechanism for the entire project.
Go ahead.
I'd also like to ask a couple of questions about this, especially in light of what's been raised tonight. Mostly to clarify my own understanding. I think I have an understanding of what we're doing and how we're doing it and why we're doing it. wanted to ask a few questions, maybe if, well, Jason or Brock, if you want Brock to ask them, answer as well. First, is our part of our bid process, did we make it clear that this was not a low bid award?
I'm gonna ask Brock to address that, but my understanding is absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's kind of the first questions. Maybe, is that true, and kind of generally, how was that made clear in the bid process?
Yes, sir. So what we did, Mr. Tim, was we had of course, a request for proposal. All of that was in it. We also had, that was on April 6th is when we did that. That was listed on our website. All the contractors that wanted to propose did that. Then we had an actual pre-bid meeting on April the 20th where they could also come in, ask questions that would be reviewed and put out by addenda later. But everybody was aware of the way the proposal was done. They were aware of the factors, and they were also aware that each factor was weighted differently. Everything was in there.
And that this was not a process that was typical of some private, public sector processes that simply low bid, period.
That's correct. It's a hybrid, basically. It's the cross between a low bid and then all the factors that go into it.
Cost is just one of
Yes,
the
sir.
components,
Yes,
an important component, or just
It
one of
is.
the components that factors into how the evaluation process is done.
It's
Correct?
a qualification-based selection, basically, is what it is.
Okay.
So there's 5 different factors.
You're kind of going to my second question in,
Yeah.
I think. Can you just talk just a minute about kind of the factors that are involved in this beyond price,
Yes, sir.
beyond cost, that went into the evaluation that led you and the superintendent to recommend Hvac as opposed to any of the others?
Yes, sir. So project approach was the first one. And it's not anything generic, it's very specific on how that contractor is going to approach our project at Collins Ferry. And there's a weighted factor for that. The next one goes down to experience of the proposed project team, meaning the actual general contractor, the actual principal they're going to have on site, and everybody that's working with them. After that is experience of the proposed subcontractors, just as the gentleman that ran here just a minute ago. The next one is the offer overview, and that basically gives the owner the opportunity to evaluate everything the contractor's done and their overall fit for this project. Things such as value, engineering, experience of the owner, the contractor's financial stability, that kind of stuff. And then finally, there's a cost factor. And I'd like to let everyone know, specifically the board, that that cost factor is the highest. It has the highest weight of any of the other, but it's only a portion. And those other 4 factors have a very, very strong standing as well once you add them together in aggregate. So they're kind of, to sum it all up, no selection is perfect. And if you have the lowest bid, you're always going to get the lowest price. That's certainly true. But when you add in all of these factors and the cost of the lowest price, or the price being a factor from an algebraic formula, it gives you the best value situation of what you can get for your money. And that's what we were trying to do. We're trying to be good stewards of taxpayer money and give them the best product we could for the best possible price.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I think what you're talking about, the first point, that's a practice that's been going on for a while. Okay, that shop our own furniture, so forth and so on. And if we're, I just think there's probably a little bit more discussion in later meetings. We can discuss it out here, talk about it. If the board is indeed wanting to approve the additional project amount, we can certainly do that. But I just think we need to probably talk about it a little bit. Okay, so.
My only point is, if that is in fact the expected cost of this entire project, which I'm assuming it is, given I'm sure just as much work has been done on determining what the new technology expansion costs are going to be and how much furniture we're going to have to buy. There's contingencies are always attached to this. It's been, correct me if I'm wrong, it's been vetted and reviewed to some extent, just as the award to Hvac has been vetted and reviewed.
Yes, sir.
And it's been reported to us as well.
Yes. So that's my point, that if we're gonna approve the project, I would suggest that we not just approve one component of the project, but the entire cost of the project that becomes then the project budget for this expansion.
Well, point's well taken, we'll certainly need to discuss it. Okay. Maybe next month? Where do you want to do it?
Well, okay, let me do it this way, and we can vote the way you want to vote. Then I would make a motion that we approve $3.65 million as a total project budget for this Column Ferry expansion project, including 3.1, whatever the number is, that includes the Hvac bid component of this.
Is that your anticipated amount?
Yeah, I might, if that's the will of the board, what I might recommend is we have two separate recommendations, so just for the record, it's very clear. The one awarding Hvac Brothers 3.135 for that, so that it's very clear in terms of that piece, and then recommendation that the total project, not exceed 3.65 million, and that the board approve that, so that, just for record keeping, I think that's clear.
If that's a more appropriate way to award a construction contract,
Yes.
and then also in approve and recognize the total cost, then a two-part recommendation, I'm fine with.
Yeah, I think that'll just provide clarity for Hvac Brothers to understand that's not a license for 500,000 more. Those are allocated
Point
funds.
well made, Jason, point well made. Okay, then I would amend my motion to reflect the way Dr. Grant's just explained.
So if I might, for the will of the board, then we would take the first recommendation as presented to award Hvac Brothers at a bid of 3.135 million.
All right, let's do that first.
So moved.
So moved, Mr. Burgess.
Second.
Second, Mr. Ransom. Unless there's any more discussion on the original budget. All in favor, please raise your hands. Passes 5-0. Okay, and second.
Okay, at the request of the board, then I would recommend that the board approve a total project cost of the Column Ferry Elementary School addition to be $3.65 million.
So moved.
Superintendent's made a recommendation, and Mr. Burgess has made the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Parrish. Unless there's further discussion, all in favor, please raise your hands. That passes 5-0. Thank you. And then, next is the final budget.
We have surplus vehicles. I know we got
Oh,
added
excuse me,
additional
I
in there.
apologize for that.
Yes.
I knew you were excited to mention that.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and we wish that right between those two big ones. Surplus vehicles, recommend surplus in the vehicles as presented.
Okay, you've heard Superintendent's recommendation. Unless you have further discussion, do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Mr. Ransom made the motion to approve. We do need a second.
Second.
Second is Argo. All in favor, please raise your hands. Passes 5-0. And
Yes, sir. Final budget for FY22. We recommend that budget be approved as presented.
you've heard his recommendation. We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
So moved, Mr. Burgess.
Second.
Second, Ms. Parrish. All in favor, please raise your hands. That passes 5-0. And you're not released yet. Okay, we have a need to go into executive session. So we need a motion to approve, if you will.
I make a motion, the board adjourn to executive session to discuss or deliberate on personnel matters as described on an affidavit that will be attached to the minutes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Argo's made that motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Ms. Parrish. All in favor, please raise your hands. Passes 5-0. Thank you, we're adjourned to executive session.
Second.